I want you to just picture a scene for a second. Imagine you are standing out in the blistering heat of a sun-scorched Middle Eastern dig site.
Oh, man. Yeah, just the intense heat.
Exactly. Like the light is harsh, it's shimmering off the sand, you're sweating right through your clothes, and there's this, like, fine dust drifting through the air and just coating the back of your throat.
Sounds miserable, honestly.
Right. But all around you are these deep excavation trenches cut down into the earth. And you're watching a team of archaeologists, and they are down on their hands and knees.
Scraping away the dirt.
Yeah, carefully scraping away the soil with these little hand trowels, inch by literal inch. And they're trying to uncover a forgotten civilization.
It's painstaking work.
It really is. Now, if you're like most people, you probably operate on a very basic assumption when you picture this kind of scene.
Yeah.
Like the deeper they dig, the older the stuff gets.
Right, that's just, common sense.
And whoever wrote something down first, whoever left the oldest surviving document at the very bottom of that trench, we assume they are the original creators of that idea.
Yeah, they get the credit.
Exactly. It's a fundamental assumption we all make. But today, we are taking the source material you sent us, and, well, we're going to completely shatter that assumption.
We really are. It is a massive paradigm shift. And that scene you just painted, it perfectly captures the reality of how we literally, unearth our own history.
Literally digging it up.
Right. So to make sense of what they find in that dust, archaeologists rely on a foundational principle called stratigraphy. And we are going to dig into how that works today because it's the key to understanding a massive intellectual debate.
A really heated one, too.
Oh, absolutely. It's a debate surrounding ancient flood narratives and creation texts. Specifically, we're pulling apart a fascinating script for an audio project called The Genesis Blueprint Part 1.
Which is based on a research brief, right?
Yeah, it's based on a really detailed research brief by Goodman Sr., and this was put together for We Walk in Christ Apologetic Ministries.
Okay, so before we get too deep into the trenches here, let's establish some clear ground rules for this deep dive. Because the source material we're looking at today, it presents a very specific religious apologetic viewpoint.
Yes, it is firmly anchored in the Protestant biblical canon.
Right. And our goal today is not to take a theological side here. We aren't here to, endorse the theology, and we aren't here to validate the skeptics who criticize it either.
Exactly. We're staying completely neutral on that front.
Right. Our mission is strictly to examine the structural and logical framework that Goodman uses, because he uses it to challenge some deeply held, really mainstream archaeological assumptions. And it's fascinating.
It's a crucial distinction to make, yeah. We are looking at this as a forensic thought experiment because Goodman takes this single architectural metaphor and he uses it to completely flip how we view the timeline of human history.
So, okay, to understand his argument, we have to start with the literal groundwork, like you mentioned earlier, stratigraphy.
Right. Let's break down how that actually works in the field. Think of human history as a giant, messy layer cake.
A layer cake, okay.
Yeah, because when ancient people built a city, they didn't just, pack up and leave when a building collapsed or a fire swept through. They just knocked the rubble flat and built the new city directly on top of the old one.
So century after century, the mound just gets higher and higher.
Precisely, it builds up. So if you want to understand how a civilization evolved in a specific location, you dig down layer by layer.
You just go backwards in time.
Right. You start at the surface and maybe you hit an Islamic layer. You keep digging and beneath that you find a Byzantine layer, then Roman, then Greek, and eventually you hit the Bronze Age.
Wow, just going deeper and deeper.
Exactly. And the deepest layer you find right before you hit virgin bedrock is always assumed to be the original. In archaeology, chronological priority gets treated as the ultimate trump card.
Because it's the oldest.
Yeah, the deeper you sink your spade, the older the artifact, and therefore it must be the absolute genesis of the culture's ideas.
Okay, that makes perfect sense to me. Oldest equals original. But this is where your source material it throws a massive wrench into the gears.
It really does. Because Goodman asks us to run a thought experiment. What if you hit that oldest layer at the very bottom of the trench, but instead of a foundational masterpiece, it is just a total chaotic mess?
Like, how so?
Well, imagine you find crude, collapsing mud brick walls, right? The bricks are stacked crookedly, the mortar is crumbling, the buildings are just structurally doomed.
Like they were built by amateurs.
Basically, yeah. They could never even hold up a roof. It's an architectural disaster, but it is technically the oldest layer you found.
Okay, so then what?
Then you step up to the layer directly above it. Technically, this layer is newer in the timeline because it's higher up, right? But it is a flawless architectural masterpiece.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the math is perfect. You see clean arches, true right angles. It achieves everything the chaotic bottom layer was attempting to do, but it executes it with perfect geometry and structural integrity.
So the question becomes, like, how do you interpret that anomaly? Did the builders of the newer perfect city simply reverse engineer the broken, collapsing mud bricks from the older city below them?
Right. Does that even make logical sense?
Wait, I have to jump in here because I think of this like looking at software development.
Oh, that's a good analogy, yeah.
Right. Like, let's say you have two versions of a program. Version 1.0 is full of bugs. It crashes constantly. The code is just a complete mess.
Total disaster, yeah.
Right. Then you look at version 2.0, and it runs flawlessly. We don't automatically assume that version 2.0 just copied the broken code from 1.0 and magically made it work.
No, of course not.
We assume both versions were attempting to execute the same master concept, the same end goal, but version 2.0 is the one that actually got it right.
Right. That software analogy maps perfectly onto the literary debate we're unpacking today. If we take that concept and apply it to ancient literature, we land right in the middle of one of the most heated historical controversies of the last century.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah, because for over 100 years, skeptics have been pointing to the literal bottom of the trench in Mesopotamia to make a very specific accusation against the Bible.
Right. So if that chaotic, crumbling mud brick layer represents something in literature, it represents the oldest clay tablets ever found in the region.
Exactly. We're talking about ancient Mesopotamian texts. The Epic of Gilgamesh.
The Sumerian King List.
Yes, and the Atrahasis Epic. These are the foundational texts of ancient Sumerian and Babylonian mythology.
And they tell all those stories, right?
Yeah, they tell stories of creation, of angry gods, and crucially, of a massive cataclysmic flood that wiped out humanity. And skeptics point out that these clay tablets are chronologically older sometimes by many centuries than the biblical Genesis account.
Okay, so because of standard stratigraphy rules, because they are found deeper in the timeline, the mainstream skeptical argument is that Genesis must be a plagiarized, derivative rewrite of those older Sumerian myths.
That's the argument, yeah. The physical tablets were carved earlier, therefore Genesis is just a derivative echo, a sanitized copy.
I have to admit, I get tripped up here. If we have carbon dating and historical records proving that the Sumerian texts existed hundreds of years before Moses supposedly wrote Genesis, how on earth can Goodman argue that Genesis isn't the copy?
It seems counterintuitive, right?
It really feels like it defies common sense. Help me understand how he gets around the basic laws of time here.
It's a very fair question. The way Goodman gets around it is by challenging the core assumption that written first equals originated first.
Okay, explain that.
While tying originality solely to the date a text was physically carved into a piece of clay assumes that the written word is the absolute beginning of an idea.
Right, which isn't always true.
It completely ignores the massive role of unwritten oral traditions. Ancient cultures passed down their histories through complex, highly accurate oral storytelling for centuries before anyone invented a stylus and a clay tablet.
Ah, okay, so just because someone carved it into clay first doesn't mean they were the first ones to experience it or conceptualize it.
Exactly.
They just had the first surviving filing cabinet, basically.
That is the exact tension Goodman targets in his research. He recognizes that chronology alone might not tell the whole story, especially if the oldest physical evidence we have, the Mesopotamian texts, are logically flawed or read like exaggerated myths.
Like the crumbling mud bricks.
Yes. So he introduces an alternative lens to reevaluate this data.
Okay, and this is where the framework of his ministry really comes into play, right? Because their motto is following the living word.
Right, which is anchored by two specific verses from the Bible.
Yeah, Psalm 119.105, which says, "Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path." And Psalm 119.133, "Order my steps in thy word."
And those verses establish his entire epistemological foundation for this deep dive.
Whoa, hold on. Epistemological foundation. That is a heavy philosophy term right there. Are you basically saying that these verses define how he determines what is true and what isn't?
Yes, my apologies for the jargon there. Epistemology is just the study of how we know what we know. For Goodman, the 66-book Protestant canon isn't viewed as a derivative text that needs to defend itself against older clay tablets.
Okay.
It is treated as the ultimate standard of truth. It is the master blueprint, to use his term.
So in his framework, those older Sumerian myths, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, are viewed as the broken, corrupted records.
Exactly. They are the crumbling mud bricks at the bottom of the trench that merely echo a true historical event.
I have to point out for the listener, this requires a massive leap of faith. You have to presuppose that the 66-book canon is flawlessly accurate to make the archaeological data fit this model.
It is definitely a specific lens, yes.
It's a fascinating framework, but what I want to know is, how does he actually handle the data? Like, if he hits a contradiction between a Sumerian tablet and the Bible, how does he evaluate that without it just turning into a theological shouting match?
Well, he structures this incredibly clinically. It is presented as a pure forensic presentation.
So it's not just blind faith.
No, he uses a 3-tier confidence scale to categorize his findings, which actually tests the data. Let's look at a specific example from the source to see how the tiers work. Let's look at the boats.
Okay, the boats. Both the Bible and the Epic of Gilgamesh describe a man building a massive boat to survive a global flood. Let's run the boats through the tiers.
All right. Tier 1 is what he calls established. This is the highest level of confidence.
So, like, undeniable facts.
Right, points that are defensible, demonstrable, and fully supported by both the text and real-world science. Now, when you look at the Epic of Gilgamesh, the boat described is a perfect cube.
Wait, a cube? Like a giant dice?
Yes, perfectly round and equal on all sides. From a physics standpoint, a massive cube dropped into turbulent water would instantly capsize. It has absolutely no stability. It's an impossible, mythic boat.
It would just roll over the second a wave hit it? That's insane.
Exactly why it falls apart forensically. But then you look at the biblical Ark in Genesis, and it's described with very specific maritime dimensions, a ratio of 30 cubits high by 50 wide by 300 long.
Okay, and does that ratio work?
Naval engineers have tested this ratio, and it is incredibly stable in rough seas. It's actually the same basic ratio used for modern cargo ships.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah. So Goodman places the engineering realism of the Ark into Tier 1. It is structurally sound, proving the newer text is the flawless blueprint, while the older text is a corrupted, physically impossible memory of the same event.
That is a wild comparison. I mean, it really makes you think. So what happens with Tier 2?
Tier 2 is reasonably aligned. These are coherent inferences. They fit the scripture and the historical data, but they go slightly beyond strict, undeniable proof.
Give me an example.
For the flood narrative, this might involve geological inferences about where the water came from, or how early animal migrations happened post-flood. It's a logical deduction that makes sense of the available evidence, even if we can't prove it in a lab.
Right. It's highly plausible, but not a hard fact. Which brings us to Tier 3.
Tier 3 is open questions. This acknowledges unresolved anomalies. It invites further scientific and historical investigation where the data is still murky.
So he's not just forcing every puzzle piece to fit.
Exactly. If there is an archaeological find that doesn't quite fit the Genesis timeline or the Sumerian timeline, Goodman doesn't force an answer. He leaves it in Tier 3 as an area for future research.
You know, if you're listening to this and wondering why a 3-tier theological chart matters to your life, think about how it effectively flips the script on the entire debate.
It really does.
Instead of treating the Mesopotamian texts as the pristine originals that the Bible copied, this framework treats those older texts as flawed beta tests.
Yeah, they're the version 1.0 code.
Right. They are corrupted data points that, precisely because of their physics-defying flaws, inadvertently prove that the underlying master narrative actually happened.
And applying this 3-tier framework gives us a totally different roadmap of shared history between these ancient cultures.
Where else does it overlap?
Well, the source material teases several areas for their audio series where this overlapping memory occurs. They plan to look at the connection between the biblical watchers and ancient pagan sages.
Oh, that sounds deep.
It is. And they ultimately want to examine fulfilled prophecy as a sort of forensic tiebreaker between the texts. But to really grasp the magnitude of what they're comparing, the deep dive hones in on one specific startling overlap.
And what's that?
The Antediluvian World.
Let me stop you there. Antediluvian. Can you translate that for me?
Yeah, it just means pre-flood, the reality that existed before the cataclysm swept everything away.
Got it. The pre-flood world.
When you strip away the theological differences, there is an incredibly uncomfortable agreement between the biblical text and ancient pagan mythology regarding what that pre-flood world looked like.
Uncomfortable how?
Well, both sources, which, remember, are from cultures that fundamentally disagreed on almost everything else, insist that there was non-human intervention in human history.
Okay, here's where it gets really strange. The source specifically holds back the heavy scripture for the second part of their series, but they explicitly tease Genesis 6.4.
Yes, a very controversial verse.
Right. This is the verse that says, there were giants in the earth in those days. It brings up the sons of God, the Nephilim, and it points to corroborating texts from the books of Job, Jude, and Peter about this non-human intervention.
It's intense stuff.
I mean, this is the bizarre stuff that Sunday school lessons usually just skip right over. You know?
Oh, absolutely. It is the strange, uncomfortable underbelly of the text. And it raises an incredibly important question for anyone studying this forensically. Why would the authors of Genesis include such a bizarre supernatural detail if they were just writing a sanitized history?
Right, you'd think they would just leave the giants out.
Exactly. But more importantly, how do two opposing ancient cultures, separated by entirely different worldviews, both share a detailed, specific memory of non-human entities interacting with humanity before a global cataclysm?
It is such a forensic anomaly. I mean, if you are a skeptic, you have to ask yourself, is this just the result of some shared global trauma?
That's one theory, yeah.
Like, did a meteor hit the Earth and everyone just invented stories about sky gods to cope? Or is it just strange cultural cross-pollination where traders swapped spooky stories around a campfire?
Right, did the stories just drift across borders?
Or, and this is the big one, is it evidence of the master blueprint that Goodman is suggesting?
Yeah.
The idea that something very real and very unnatural reached into the human story, and both cultures recorded it.
They just recorded it differently.
Exactly. One culture recorded it as a chaotic, mythological mud brick wall full of demigods, and the other recorded it as a structured historical warning.
Forces you to look at the bottom of that archaeological trench completely differently, doesn't it? When you look at the Epic of Gilgamesh or the Book of Genesis, are you looking at the pure genesis of human imagination?
Right.
Or are you looking at the traumatized fragments of a civilization trying to make sense of an event that fundamentally broke their world?
Man, it is a lot to wrap your head around. Let's recap the journey we've taken today, because we covered some serious ground here.
We really did.
We started at the dusty bottom of an excavation trench, breaking down how stratigraphy works, and the basic assumption that the oldest layer is the original.
And we evaluated the century-old accusation against Genesis, the idea that older texts, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, prove the Bible is just a derivative, plagiarized myth.
Then we unpacked BC Goodman Sr.'s three-tier forensic framework.
Right, and we saw how that framework flips the timeline on its head by treating the biblical canon as the master blueprint, using the physics of the Ark versus that impossible cube boat to demonstrate structural integrity over chronological age.
That cube boat is still cracking me up.
Yeah.
And finally, we landed on this eerie, uncomfortable shared memory between opposing cultures, the presence of giants, the Nephilim, and non-human intervention in the pre-flood world.
The reason this matters to you, whether you are fascinated by ancient archaeology, theology, or just human history in general, is because this entire discussion is a masterclass in critical thinking.
It really is.
It challenges you to question your fundamental assumptions. It shows how the lens through which you view raw data completely changes the reality you construct.
Totally.
If your lens prioritizes strict chronological age, like who wrote it down first, you get one version of history. But if your lens prioritizes structural integrity, logic, and physical realism, the entire timeline reorganizes itself.
You know, think about how we consume information today. We have this deep-seated assumption that the first person to publish an idea, the first breaking news tweet, or the first culture to write down a concept is the absolute authority on the truth.
We just take it as fact.
Right, but how often is the first draft we see merely a corrupted, messy echo of a much older, unwritten truth? What else in our history, or even in the media we consume daily, might we be reading backward?
It's a perspective shift that makes you question the foundation of every narrative you encounter. The oldest surviving record isn't always the original intent.
It really does make you wonder what else is buried in the mud bricks. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
Yes.
Thanks for listening. We hope you walk away with some new knowledge, a fresh perspective on how history is constructed, and maybe a few lingering questions of your own about what is really at the bottom of the trench.